Okay guys, today what we're going to do is we're going to look at Acts. And you remember last week Jesus had told them to go to Jerusalem and wait for the Holy Spirit to come. And that's the setting for where we're going to begin today. It is now Pentecost and they have been waiting. And as they are all gathered together at Pentecost, all of a sudden, without any warning, a great wind comes from out of nowhere. They don't even know where it came from. And as the wind came and blew in, these tongues of fire landed upon the disciples. And as the tongues of fire landed upon them, they were suddenly able to speak in languages that they did not know, so that the people that were gathering could hear in their own language the great works of what God had done. It was amazing, and people were rushing in so that they could see. There were Jews from all over the world. In fact, there were 16 different nations that represented every nation in the world there that they had come in for Pentecost. And they were so surprised by what they saw. They said, how is this possible? Are these not Galileans? It doesn't make sense that they could do this. They were shocked and they were amazed. And some of them were so shocked that they said, they've got to be drunk. And at this, Peter stood up and he said, oh man, these men are not drunk. It's too early in the morning for that. He stood up and he said, what I'm about to say to you, I want you to listen. And I want to make sure that you get it. And you need to get it straight. This story is important, so listen up. And he said, it comes from, if you remember the prophet Joel, you've heard through Joel that he said that in the last days that there are going to be sons and daughters that will prophesy. There will be men who have dreams and women with visions and slaves and servants that will prophesy. And what they are doing is they are declaring the miracles and the wonders and awe of God. And those who believe in Jesus, they're the ones that will be saved. He said, now listen to this. This is extremely important you get this, because Jesus was approved by God. He was sent by God to us. He came to work these miracles and wonders because God sent him. And you know it. You know what I'm saying is true. You know that God planned for Jesus to come to this earth and to die. He sent his own son and he brought him in, and you handed him over to evil men. You're the ones that handed him over. And you handed him over even though God planned for this to happen, that when he died, he rose from the dead and raised to life. Death could not hold him. It's just like what David, the prophet, had said. And he spoke as if he was speaking of Christ, and he said that death could not hold him, that he was always with the Lord and the Lord was always with him, and that the Lord enabled that his heart would be glad and that his tongue would praise and that his words would shout the declarations of God, and that his body would live in hope and that it would not see decay. And all of this happened to show that God has a path for life and that he makes us glad when we hear this. You know, David was our ancestor and he was a prophet of God. And he told us about God's promise. He showed us the promises of God, and God and his family is that we are a part of his family, that we too are a part of this. And that he told us that God would not leave him and that his body would not know decay. And God raised Jesus from the dead. He raised him and he took Jesus and he sat him at his right hand and he said, son, I'm going to put the enemies and I'm going to set them and they will be your footstool at your feet. And even though you knew this, you know it's true, you still did what you did. And at that, the men were stopped. They couldn't say anything, and they just looked at Peter and they shouted out, what do we do? What do we do? And he looked at them and he said, you need to repent. You need to be baptized. You need to receive the Holy Spirit that he has sent and believe on him and save yourselves from this sick and stupid culture that you are a part of. And at that moment, well over 3,000 believed. And as they gathered together, they came and they held all things in common. And what they began to do is they began to teach the apostles' teaching. They began to have fellowship. They began to eat and break bread. And they prayed and they gave and they held all things in good. And as they did that, the Lord brought increase to them. May the Lord honor the story of his word.